Hey everybody, Karsten with Top & Go Productions here, and today we're taking a look at the first of the 5 new Commander 2014 decks. In each video, we will highlight the new cards, talk about great additions you can make to the deck for less than $25, and suggest some cards to cut to make room for said additions. Today we look at changes made by Top & Go Productions writer Nick Beatman on the red deck, built from scratch. Mono Red has often been pigeonholed into highly aggressive decks because it doesn't have the card draw, tutors, or ramp necessary for decks to win in a long game in Commander. Built from Scratch attempts to remedy this disparity by offering Red an alternative strategy centered on grinding out an advantage through artifact recursion. Unfortunately, the deck isn't quite successful in its goals out of the box, as it's a little bit lacking in artifact win conditions that really reward it for committing to the theme. Later on, we'll see how much we can improve the deck's power level on a limited budget. But first, let's take a closer look at the new cards and commanders from Built from Scratch. Daretti Scrap Savant is an interesting commander that pushes Mono Red away from aggro and towards a more grindy, controlling deck. His +2 gives you valuable card selection and stocks your graveyard for his second ability, which imitates the powerful effect of a Goblin Welder. His ultimate is not something that you're going to be able to achieve in most games, but it provides incredible resilience and inevitability to a deck based around artifacts. Felden of the Third Path is another commander that breaks from Red's traditional mold, offering a sort of reanimation engine to a color that is normally limited in how it interacts with the graveyard. A Felden deck looks to dump creatures with powerful effects into the graveyard and repeatedly recur them with its commander. Dualcaster Mage puts Reverberate onto an Enter the Battlefield trigger, making it much easier for you to abuse with effects like Blink and reanimation engines. He also combos out pretty easily with clone spells. Just cast Twin Flame or Rite of Replication on one of your creatures, copy the clone spell with Dualcaster Mage, then target Dualcaster Mage with the copy. You'll be able to keep creating new copies and new Dualcaster tokens for as long as you wish. Warmonger Hellkite. If you're in the business of ending the game quickly, a card like this can be invaluable. It's pretty hard for a stalemate to last when this guy is forcing everyone to attack each turn. Tyrant's Familiar. The haste in this guy is sweet, and the Lieutenant ability will be more or less relevant depending on your commander. A deck with an expensive commander or one who is rarely cast won't care for him, but a cheap commander will get a lot of value out of him. Commander's Sphere. It's pretty comparable to Mind Stone. It may not be quite as cheap, but it fixes your mana and cashes in for a card much more easily than its predecessor. Unstable Obelisk. It's not quite efficient, but some color identities have no way of dealing with certain permanent types, and in these cases, Unstable Obelisk serves an important role. Loreseeker's Stone. It doesn't have a great ratio of mana spent to cards drawn, but there are some colors that will accept whatever scraps of card advantage Wizards tosses their way. Bitter Feud. Some decks will just want an easy way to pick off the most threatening opponent, while others that are more politically oriented will use it to start fights between other players. Impact Resonance. It's efficiently costed and it will probably kill anything important, which puts it head and shoulders above most other red spot removal spells. The only downside to the card is that its conditional nature means it won't always be live at the moment you need it to be. Still, it's adequate removal in most situations that aren't time sensitive. Volcanic Offering. This is one hell of a card. While the rest of the offering cycle benefit your opponents, this card is a lot less likely to backfire on you since it can't target your stuff. Most of the time, this will kill the 2 creatures and the 2 lands you're most afraid of. Scrap Mastery. This is a powerhouse in any red deck not focused on hardcore aggro. In the slower, more artifact-heavy red decks, this can be both a potent weapon against other players' artifacts and an insurance policy in case you get hit by one of the format's many artifact sweepers. Incite Rebellion. Wrecks weenie decks and token builds, but is much less effective against small numbers of large creatures. Arcane Lighthouse. It's probably never going to be a format staple, but it's worth mentioning as a potential tech for metagames that have a tough time dealing with Ural or Sigarda. Flamekin Village. Haste is an incredibly valuable effect in Commander, as it gives your opponents much less time to react to your plays and control your board. Having the ability to grant haste on a land means that not only is your haste granting effect even more difficult to remove than something like Urbrask or Lightning Greaves, but your haste granter doesn't even take up a card slot. With Built from Scratch's new cards out of the way, let's see what we can do to improve the deck on a limited budget. First, we need to address the quality of the deck's artifact haymakers. Mindslaver is easily one of the most powerful effects ever printed on an artifact, so it's a natural fit for Built from Scratch. Next, Nevinyrral's Disc is an artifact-based board wipe that conveniently does not destroy planeswalkers, allowing Daretti to live through the effect and recur it for future use. One of the main issues with artifact decks is how vulnerable they are. Between Bane of Progress, Vandal Blast, and Austere Command, Most colors in Commander have tools for wiping all the artifacts off the battlefield. One proactive answer we can run is Darksteel Forge. Not only does the Forge protect our artifacts against most wipes, it has combo potential with Nevinral's Disc. If you activate Disc with a Forge on the field, it'll attempt to destroy itself, fail, and stick around until the next turn. If we're going to include artifact combos, then we'll need more tutors to help us consistently assemble them. In a deck with a heavy artifact count and a lot of recursion, Kuldotha Forgemaster is a perfect fit for this role. Mirror Battlesphere and Pentavis were included in Built from Scratch because you can net a ton of tokens by repeatedly cycling them through with Duretti's recursion ability. We can add Precursor Golem to our list because it serves a similar function at a lower place on our curve. Burnished Heart and Duplicant have proven themselves to be solid artifact staples, and they work especially well in a list that can easily reuse their abilities to get value. Built from Scratch's designer did a good job including artifacts that you would want to sacrifice, such as Solemn Simulacrum and the Wellsprings. Another card that fits with this theme is Ugin's Nexus, which not only acts as sack fodder for Duretti's ability, but also grants an extra turn in the process. Just because your commander is a capable recursion engine doesn't mean he has to be the only one such card in your deck. Nim Deathmantle and Mimic Vat not only help you get extra uses out of your creatures, but if you use them to recur artifact creatures, then you've got an endless source of sack fodder for Duretti's ability. As you may find when playing with Duretti, looting feeds into reanimation quite well. To further take advantage of this synergy, we can include Memory Jar and Reforge the Soul, which can restock our graveyards and our hands in a color that is normally starved for card advantage. As I mentioned before, this deck is a little light on win conditions. A finisher that can help us translate our horde of artifacts into a victory condition would be perfect for our deck, and Hellkite Igniter fits the bill. We're going to have to cut a few cards in order to make room for all the goodies we've added. Since we put in 13 new cards, here are the 13 weakest cards from the original Built from Scratch list. There aren't a whole lot of colored spells in a deck centered around artifacts, so Ruby Medallion is pretty suboptimal here. Bottle Gnomes, Cathodian, Mirror, Panic Spellbomb, and Pilgrim's Eye are all artifacts that synergize with Duretti's ability to sacrifice and recur artifacts, but the effects they produce are just not powerful enough to justify their inclusion. Whip Flare is not going to kill any of the huge threats you're likely to see in a game of Commander, and Incite Rebellion is also incapable of affecting the board when your opponents have a small number of large dudes, as is often the case in this format. Apocryphite and Liquid Metal Coating aren't good for much except providing Duretti with sack fodder, which isn't really worth the deck space when we already have a bunch of artifacts that benefit us when they die. Warmonger Hellkite and Tuk Tuk the Explorer are essentially just vanilla creatures, which are usually not very good in Commander. We'd rather use our card slots for things that reinforce our deck's themes than crash in with boring dragons and goblins. If you hadn't noticed, Built from Scratch is much closer to the control side of the deck spectrum than the aggro side. This means that a card like Bitter Feud, which does nothing but increase your damage output, isn't the kind of effect our deck is looking for. With these changes, you can expect to spend more time grinding out value and closing out the game, and a lot less time praying for a top deck. Overall, Built from Scratch is a refreshing break from how Red decks typically function in Commander, and its new cards provide an exciting direction for Red's future. Did you buy the Duretti deck? If so, let us know in the comment section below how you've enjoyed the deck overall. Thanks again to Nick Beatman for his take on Built from Scratch. Tune in next time for our next overview of the new Commander product. I'm Karsten, and as always, thanks for watching.